Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
The United States is in crisis this weekend after the latest in a long line of gun crimes, racial hatred, and the consequences of slavery and segregation on which the US was built. The mass murder of black Christians in Charleston, South Carolina, once upon a time the satanic center of the mass slavery of Africans bought and sold like cattle, may yet trigger in this long hot summer some cataclysmic events, like those of the 1960s, in the wake of the assassinations of President Kennedy, his brother Robert, Malcolm X, and the Reverend Martin Luther King.
But if they don't, it's just a matter of time. Seldom a week goes by when a black man is not murdered or grievously assaulted by a white police officer, who's usually cleared of any blame by an all-white tribunal.
Meanwhile, it begins to take form, though whether Mrs. Hillary Clinton can accurately be described as a new generation at the age of 67 must be debatable, but she seems certain to be the Democratic Party nominee to succeed President Obama. And what do you know? The Republican is likely to be Jeb Bush, son of one President Bush, brother of another. Crikey, I knew they were close to the Saudis, but this is real dynasty. Joining us now to discuss the American imbroglio is RT's own Stacy Herbert. Stacy, welcome to the Sputnik. Let's start with the disastrous crime in South Carolina. This young man murdered a lot of people. Is this going to beget still more murders? Is America on the brink of some kind of race war?
Well, just after it, a few hours later, there was another shooting at a Memphis, Tennessee church. There was at a black church, a shooting toward it. Nobody was killed. But there is a lot of tension. I think it's going on the same that how you were talking about Clinton and Bush, two dynasties in America look like they could possibly be the two candidates for Republican and Democrat in America. I think America's transitioning from an empire into whatever comes next. They had the exorbitant privilege of the dollar. They're losing that privilege. And in America, they're also losing the white privilege. So Americans who are white have had a privilege in our society until last year, when the new generation coming into the schools, you know, it was less than 50% of them were white. So I think there's a lot of tension psychologically in the population. They're no longer an empire. When they were an empire, by the way, as they were building our empire in America, we refused to admit it. We pretended we were an upstart, you know, democratic nation, and we would never become imperial like the Brits that we separated from. But now that we're losing it, we're becoming very imperial, openly imperial in terms of our behavior as we're losing it. So we're trans-imperial, you can call us. We want to be like an empire, but we've already lost it. That's over.
Where's this going to go? I mean, given the prevalence of powerful automatic weapons in the United States, any conflict built around racial lines we could be talking about a new civil war.
Well, that's one of the reasons also why the American police force is so deadly. I mean, if you look at the U.S. police deaths and the British police deaths since 1791, and they have records for both nations since 1791, as a proportion of the population, there have been just as many UK police officers killed in the line of duty as American police officers. And yet, a lot more victims of police violence in the United States. Now, one of the reasons is that Americans are very well armed. Here, the police are pretty certain when they go to arrest somebody, they're not going to be armed with an AK-47. In the U.S., there's a good chance the person you're going to arrest could have an AK-47. And I think a lot of police are very afraid, and they're in particular afraid of black people that they're going to arrest or confront. They see them as more, you know, superpower or super, you know, weapons that they're going to have.
Wow. Well, look, let's turn to the political front, though, of course, these two things are not at all disconnected. I mean, Donald Trump, let's talk about him before we shall overcome, as the song says. What did he say on the launch of his campaign?
When he launched his campaign, he mentioned that he wants to build a wall between the United States and Mexico and get Mexico...
Kind of a Berlin Wall?
Yes, a Berlin Wall, or like the wall in Israel, Palestine. And then he said that the Mexicans in America, they are rapists. He said they're rapists.
You can actually say that
in America, you can say whatever you want. But the guy who shot up at the church in Charleston, South Carolina, he also said that when killing these 9 African Americans in this church, he said that as he was reloading, he said, "I'm sorry, but your men rape our women, and you're taking over this country." I think that's a good, microcosm of what is going on in America in general, around the world.
And Trump is reflecting that same idea.
Yes, he mentions China. He mentions, like, I like the Chinese. They bought my house. They bought one of my properties for $15 million, but you know what? We got to stop them.
Meanwhile, he's got actors who he pays $50 each to stand there supporting him at the moment.
Oh, really? They were actors?
Well, again, like, you could probably compare that to the U.S. on the world stage, as you have people, basically forced to pretend that they agree with the U.S. position in the world. And behind the scenes, we find out that they're actually saying, "Oh my God, these guys are nutters."
He's not likely to be a Ross Perot, though, is he? First of all, he doesn't have anything like Ross Perot's money.
No.
And neither does he have his appeal. The main battle is going to be between Republican and Democrat. I'm certain of that. How certain are you that it's another Bush-Clinton affair?
Well, if you recall, the last time I was on your show, I didn't think Bush would actually run. I didn't think he would put his name in to the hat to run, because I thought
I wasn't going to mention that.
Yeah, I thought he would think. I thought that America wasn't ready for a dynasty, for more of a British sort of aristocratic sort of system, but they clearly are. I think this is a way, maybe. I don't think, however, the base of the Republican Party. I think the power, like powerful people, money people like Bush, and he's probably more sensible than his brother.
That wouldn't be difficult.
Yeah, that wouldn't be difficult. But the base, remember, Jeb Bush is Catholic, George W. Bush is evangelical. And the evangelical voting base of the Republican Party knew that. They understood that he was one of them. That's why they voted for him.
Jeb Bush is Catholic? How did that happen?
How did that happen?
We've got Tony Blair, and now you're telling me we've got Jeb Bush, too?
He converted to Catholicism. He was born Episcopalian, like George H.W. Bush, and he became Catholic. Now, this also presents an interesting thing because, of course, the Pope issued the encyclical about climate change, which Americans are, especially Republicans, like 80–90% of them believe it's either a hoax or it's caused by, natural process. So the Pope has come out with this encyclical to say, he's calling it like a giant trash heap of we've turned Earth into, and that we have to stop climate change. So the 2 frontrunners on the Republican side are Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, 2 Catholics. So there's always that suspicion in America of Catholics that they're going to take orders from the popes.
Hillary Clinton. I mean, I find it difficult to take it seriously. The idea that this woman will be the Democrat nominee, but if she is, she's likely to win, I would have thought. Because, I mean, a Republican, maybe I'm wrong, but a Republican Bush 3 seems such a big ask of the United States.
Well, like I said, I don't think Bush, I think it might be Marco Rubio who comes out ahead. He's, Latino. He's, the new generation is coming up. And I think also he polls better than Bush against Clinton in the 3, basically, to become president, you have to win 2 of the 3 states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. And he does best in the polls against Clinton in those states. She still wins Florida right now, even though he was a senator from Florida. Now, the other problem, however, is that the Cuban story, Obama has kind of taken that away from him, and he's resolved it. You can't now suddenly want to bring back something from the past in order. He would, I think, have done better if Obama had not pulled that rug out from under him.
But Hillary is plagued by ethical issues, plagued by the downside of her husband's presidency. He was quite well thought of at the time, but since then, things like the abolition of the Glass-Steagall Act, the 3 strikes and you're out, legal changes that he made, which has led to mass incarceration of black people in America, Can Hillary surmount those things?
Well, okay. Now, in the American system, you have the primaries first and then the election. So it's what happens in the primaries, you don't know. She has to run against Bernie Sanders, who is the only socialist in America. He's running for the Democratic ticket. She's going to have to go further left in the primaries to make sure, like, she gets enough votes. In the Republican side, the Catholics, Rubio and Jeb Bush, are going to have to disown the Pope, and they're going to have to be crazy for the evangelicals. That leaves Scott Walker, by the way. He's the third right now in the polling. And he's from Wisconsin, northern, but he's evangelical and he's proven his track record
smashed the unions there.
Smashed the unions, all the women unions. He left untouched the police and firemen unions, which are majority male. The firemen is 97% male. But he smashed the teachers and the nurses, the women, the female-based unions.
And so President Obama's tenure comes to a rather pitiful, pathetic, sputtering end, doesn't it? In the United States, there seems to be an intense hatred of Obama amongst tens of millions of people.
Well, you see it playing out in Charleston, South Carolina. You know, there was an escalation in the sort of hate crimes against black people. But on the other side, you also see world, one would think, against all sorts of drone wars and surveillance. And the left wing were very good at standing up against George W. Bush and very vocal. They really were challenging him. There was some real conflict in the U.S. and challenge and, people standing up to authority. Now it's just been because the right wing doesn't mind that. And the right wing has been for him with the trade deal that the left wing has now scuppered in terms of the TPP.
Stacy Herbert, thank you. That's a story that's going to run and run.
Coming up after the break, how does policing in London look if you're black? Find out, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Sputnik. The BBC six-parter, The Met, Policing London, has attracted much critical acclaim. It seeks to show the difficulties and complexities of policing this great metropolis, where the minorities are the majority, except in the police force, of course.
To be fair, though, the Met Police have several times acknowledged their institutionalized problem with racism. They have been less good at solving the problem, though.
Joining us now is a man who I'm sure knows how to solve the problem. He's the great human rights leader, Stafford Scott, coordinator of Tottenham Rights and supporter of the Mark Duggan campaign. I suppose, Stafford, in Tottenham, the programme didn't go down entirely well.
I haven't met anybody from Tottenham or from the surrounding areas who felt that that was a realistic portrayal of their relationship with the Metropolitan Police Service. As far as most people are concerned that I've met, it was fluff. I think I would agree with what Simon Jenkins wrote in The Guardian about it, that it's just fluff, it's just PR, it's Met PR, but it's dangerous PR, because it's those kind of programmes that only show the side of the policing that the police want us to see.
Is the problem at the top of the police or at the bottom?
Well, we saw the commissioner on telly and we heard him say they hadn't arrested anybody in the last 7 years. So the problem isn't with the commissioners, it's not with the chief superintendents, it's with the foot soldiers, it's with the rank and file, it's with the everyday Bobby. And what the programme failed to show us was about the canteen culture, because that's what we've been complaining about ever since I was a child, the canteen culture, where it becomes, where racism and racist behaviours become normalised and where black people become stereotypes. And that's what we weren't seeing in this programme. And what we want to see, a programme about the Met, is how they address those issues and how they deal with those issues.
Well, you see, I was hoping that your answer would be the reverse, because that would be much easier to deal with. As somebody running for the office of Mayor of London and hoping to run the police, if the problem was at the top, it would be much easier.
Absolutely.
We'd just remove the people at the top, make you the chief constable, and hey presto, the problem would be over. But It's bigger than that because the problem is further down amongst the rank and file. And are there any signs that it's getting any better, or are there signs it's getting worse?
I think there was a period post-Macpherson and another period post the verdict in the Mark Duggan inquest where the police appeared to be trying to control their officers, control their behaviours and control their practices. Since Macpherson, they've definitely gone back to their bad old ways. And since this programme was first filmed, they've gone back to their hard old ways. In Tottenham at the moment, we are waiting for the launch of Operation Shield, which is a pilot of the Boston model, which is the most oppressive kind of policing that these police officers could possibly wish to bring to an area like Tottenham. It's not just Tottenham, they're also bringing it to Brixton, the other area that was ironic.
I wonder what Tottenham and Brixton have in common.
Well, I think what we have in common is history. And I think that the Metropolitan Police Service, what they have is a very long memory. And I think that what they want to do is come back into areas like Tottenham and Brixton and try to equal old scores. I think that because of what happened in Tottenham on the 4th of August 2011, Trident are desperate to get back in there. And now the mayor, the local authority and the police have come together to create an opportunity for them to come back into Tottenham. But if you look at all of the statistics, there's no reason whatsoever why Tottenham should be a focus of this.
Well, the blood runs cold at the thought of an American policing model being applied on the streets of London. Has this been subject to any public consultation, any public debate? I mean, I saw one of the most remarkable sites on this programme in Brixton, where a comrade of mine, Lee Jasper, is ranting a panel of powerful people who are representing the police, and every person on the panel is white.
Absolutely. Every person's white. They're all telling us that just hold on, we're aware of the issues, we know what the problems are, we're going to address them, we're going to solve them. And then what we see is in another few years, we see another all-white panel, generally different people, who are trying to tell us the same exact message. Unlike the BBC, we don't fall for that message easily, because we experience policing. They're not changing, they're not making a difference. And the reality is the only things that have changed since when I was growing up in the 80s is the fact that there's cameras in vans so that we don't get beaten up in the vans in the way that we used to before. But we get beaten on the streets. We get roughed up on the streets before they bring us into those police stations. And if you look at the statistics around stop and search, as an example, those statistics have actually shot up and they haven't gone down. The Met hasn't learned anything. And for that, I'm very, very clear.
The irony of this all, with the title of Policing London, the one spot that they're missing and where a lot of criminal activities are taking place is the city.
In the city of London, absolutely, where the Met doesn't have the responsibility there, and that might actually be a good thing. But it means that we're not seeing the whole picture, but it's being told to people that this is the whole picture. I was invited to meet the producers of that show whilst they were filming. I assumed, wrongly, that they were going to invite me for an interview. They invited me for a coffee, gave me some DVDs of what they'd done previously, and just told me that they were doing this. And what that really says is they know the voices of dissent, but they don't want to put those voices of dissent on film. The Met has a massive PR budget. It used to be bigger than the entire budget for the IPCC, the organisation with responsibility for holding them to account. They're brilliant at PR. They really do not need taxpayers' money to be paid helping them do the job. And unfortunately, that's exactly what the BBC is doing at the moment.
The Reverend Jesse Jackson was on the radio this morning from the United States in the wake of the South Carolina, the Charleston massacre in the African church there. And he made the point that black-white inequalities in wealth, black-white inequalities in living conditions, housing circumstances, employment and other prospects were actually getting worse in the United States, getting wider. Is that the same here?
Absolutely. In the 1980s, I went on telly and actually spoke about it's not the kind of language I was used to today, but I was talking about a subculture that was growing in front of our very eyes. The problem here, and the problem with most of white societies, when we talk about racism, people want to believe that it's a victimless crime. But it's not a victimless crime. If you're young and you go to school and you're the victim of racism from teachers and head teachers and you're excluded from school, that has an impact. Has an impact on your ability to be able to stay with the mainstream. An impact on your ability to be able to go forth, get jobs and work. If it happens to one person, the rest of the community can support them. But if it happens to all the community, then there's no support for them. So we have some young people, particularly in our community, who are particularly marginalised and isolated from the mainstream, who are totally cut off and almost left to their own devices until the one service that they do get from the mainstream turns up. And that's our mates in the Metropolitan Police Service. And when by the programme.
And of course, influences the entire subculture.
Absolutely.
28 times you are more likely to be stopped and searched if you're black or Asian than if you are white. That's a phenomenal difference that cannot possibly be explained by conviction rates or even charging rates.
Absolutely.
Although I heard Lee Jasper on this programme, on the Met, on BBC, say that you're twice as likely to be actually taken to court for possession of cannabis if you're black than if you're white.
Absolutely.
I'd like to know how anyone explains that.
No, it's simple. When police officers are given the power of using their discretion and they arrest black people, they choose not to use that discretion. When they arrest black people, they criminalise us in ways that they wouldn't do to your average white middle-class person per se. So there's a discretion issue that isn't being used. There's powers that are being abused. And those who sit there as commissioner and borough commanders, they're aware of it and they're incapable and unable of stopping their officers. And I'll give you an example. Any time since Victor Olisa came to Tottenham, we had a fractious relationship at the beginning. Eventually, we have... I actually like the man now, but every time I organise a meeting for the Mark Duggan Justice Campaign, his officers turn up at the venues. And the reason why they turn up is because they're trying to harass those venues and scare those venues into hosting us. He has promised me that he would stop that. He has been totally incapable of doing it. His managers underneath him, his senior officers send other lesser officers to come to the venues. They came there last week. What I'm going to do, since he's unable to stop it, I'm going to tell him that the next time that happens, I will be carrying out a citizen's arrest on those officers because I believe that their behaviour is likely to cause a breach of the peace. It's unnecessary and it's harassment. But he is incapable of being able to stop them. So the politicians, those at the top echelons of the police service, can say what they want to say. Until they can absolutely have control over their officers and get their officers to show restraint, then it's just words, and they're just meaningless words. I have lived through at least 15 different police commissioners. I've heard it all from all of them. And some of them I've heard it saying it better and more believable than the current commissioner. And none of them are actually able to deliver.
Stafford Scott, we'll have to talk to you, I'm sure, again.
Thank you, sir.
And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, we asked, is Bush versus Clinton again really the best the US can do? To which Ricardo Picasso answers, regardless of the name, it's Corporation Donkey versus Corporation Elephant. Is it really America's idea of democracy?
Two cheeks of the same backside.
Exactly. And about the Metropolitan Police, the BBC series, Del Strain comedian says, same old Bill. PR is better and with camera have to be careful now. That's all that we've got for this week.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
You can stay in touch with us on Twitter at RT_Sputnik, and on Facebook, you can like us on Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.